Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm so excited to share with you Holo Taco's new Dark Academia collection. As you can see, this is a massive 8-piece collection in a mix of finishes, but the cool thing about it is that it's also going to be available as 2 separate bundles as well as individually. So as always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons. For now, let's just get into the swatches. So starting with the Undergrad Bundle, the first polish is Headhunter, and this one is described as a dark hunter green cream. I absolutely love this one. I just love dark greens like this so much, and this one had flawless one coat coverage. I was just so blown away. Easily one of my favorites. Next we have Foreshadow, and this one is a medium warm gray polish in their cream formula. I would say this one borders on being a taupe. It really is so warm that it almost has that kind of putty color to it, but I still would consider it a gray. But however you decide to describe it, this one had another one coat formula. Up next we have Ivory Tower, and this one is described as an off-white warm ivory cream. And this one is not a one coater, but it still had really impressive coverage on the first coat alone. I genuinely was so surprised to see how well it covered. It just had a few light spots or streaks. Granted, my nails are longer, so depending on your nail length and application, you might be able to get away with one coat, but I definitely would recommend just doing 2. It really makes it look so even and so nice, and this one is such a beautiful color. I love ivory shades so much. I just find them so flattering. And the last polish in the Undergrad Bundle is Devil's Advocate, and this one is described as a blackened oxblood red semi-translucent crelly. And a crelly, if you don't know, is more of a buildable formula that's somewhere in between a cream and a jelly polish. So as you can see on the first coat here, it definitely is a bit thinner. It's not as creamy and opaque as the previous 3 creams. So it is a little bit on the sheer side, but it's not as sheer as traditional jelly polishes that give you a very translucent stained glass kind of effect. Unfortunately, I didn't find the formula on this one was super even coverage or self-leveling. So as you saw on the first coat, there were some light patches, but it did build up to be fully opaque in 2 coats. And here is the Undergrad Bundle worn as a Skittle in natural lighting. I'm wearing 1 coat of Headhunter and Foreshadow on my index and middle finger respectively, just to show you that they really are one coaters. Even on my longer nails and in direct light, you can't see through to any nail line, but I still did do 2 coats for Ivory Tower and Devil's Advocate. Here in brighter indirect light, you can see just how dark these colors can look, mainly Headhunter and Devil's Advocate, where they kind of look black, especially if you're in lower lighting. It can become a little hard to tell them apart. Moving on to the Grad School Bundle, the first polish we have is Inkwell, and this one is described as a blackened sepia bronze micro shimmer formula. So you can see this one is definitely another super dark shade. The base color definitely does have a little bit of that brownish tinge, but just like it's described, it is very much a blackened version. So once you build it up to the second coat, it kind of loses more of that brown color and then just looks a little bit more black in my opinion. The bronzy shimmer definitely does warm it up a little bit, but it really is on the subtle side. So as you can see, as I'm moving my finger around, the shimmer just kind of gets swallowed up by the base color. So it's really subtle. Next we have Ivy League, and this one is described as a deep blackened green jelly base with warm green shimmers. So I was kind of confused to see this described as being a jelly base. It's kind of hard to tell, but mainly because it is just so packed with those shimmer particles. And you can see it is very full coverage on the first coat alone. It is a little bit sheer though, so I wouldn't call it a one coater like the other polishes, but you definitely wouldn't need more than 2 coats unless your nails are a lot longer than mine. But yeah, I really love this one too. I thought it was just so beautiful. Even though this does have a blackened kind of base color like the last polish, I like that the shimmers just stood out a lot more in this one. The next polish we have is Silent Library, and this one is a deep muted navy frosted metal with metallic silver flakes. I also really love this one. I just love any kind of steely blue sort of shade, and this one is just so perfect. I was honestly kind of surprised that this was one of the frosted metals because it just looks a little bit different compared to other frosted metals. Even though this one does have a lot of those silver metallic flakies, I feel like it just didn't have that same foily quality that some of the other ones had. So in my opinion, this one just didn't have that same kind of really reflective mirror-like shine, but I still really love it. It was a little sheer on the first coat, but perfectly opaque in two. And rounding out the Grad School Bundle and the Dark Academia collection, we have Secret Society, and this one is described as a grayish jelly base with gold to bronze micro shifting shimmer and a scattered hollow effect. Again, I wouldn't really call this one a jelly base. I would just say it's more of a crelly because you can see it is very full coverage on the first coat. There is just a little bit of sheerness, but once you do the second coat, it becomes fully opaque. While with actual jellies, you can build them up with as many coats as you want, but they are just never going to reach full opacity. But that aside, this one was absolutely stunning. Again, it had a flawless formula and the color was just so unique. It's not one that I would usually go for, but I think it looks really cool. And here is the Grad School Bundle worn as a Skittle on my other hand. So even though this hand has shorter nails, I still did need 2 coats for each polish. I just think that they generally have a slightly thinner, crelly kind of base, so you want a second coat to make them fully opaque. And I thought that they looked great. I love that this bundle is a lot more sparkly compared to the previous one that was just all creams with the one crelly. It was also interesting that this one had 3 shimmer formulas, but they're still very different from each other. The downside though is with Inkwell, because if you're not looking at it in direct sunlight or under a direct light source like your desk lighting, it's going to be really hard to see that shimmer. I feel like it just looks like a black polish, which I don't love. I wish you could tell that it was brown and shimmery. And here's the collection worn together so you can see just how cohesive they are. The color palette can be a little samey, like we have 2 grays, 2 greens. I would argue that the red and the brown are kind of similar just because of how dark they are, but I still really like it. Now moving on to comparisons, we're starting with Headhunter and obviously looking at it next to Modest Moss, which was the green from last year. And even though that one is a dusty green, you can see that that one is so much lighter, so it's definitely not a dupe. I also had to show this next to ILNP's Treetop, which just came out in their Campground collection. If anything, that one's a little bit more similar to Modest Moss, just more olivey. For a darker green, here it is next to ILNP's Pine from last year's fall bundle, but it's still not similar by any means because Pine is almost like a bright emerald kind of color. I thought maybe Loud Lacquer's Office in the Trees would be a little bit closer, and I would argue that it is, at least compared to ILNP's Pine, but it's still not a dupe by any means. Then for Foreshadow, I was immediately reminded of ILNP's Mushroom from the recent Campground collection. That one I would say is more of a true taupey color, so it's a lot warmer and less gray. So I thought more similar polishes would be Starrely's Lone Wolf from the Heartbreak Hues collection earlier this year, but as you can see, that one's a little bit lighter and again a little bit warmer as well. So I was convinced that Essie's Sleigh would be even closer, since when I originally compared that one to ILNP's Mushroom, Essie's was just a lot darker, and I feel like they have a very similar value, but Essie's is a little bit more brown leaning. But once you see them on the nail, they still do not compare. I feel like Foreshadow almost makes the other two look like browns instead of taupes, so yeah, not dupes. And I don't have Duct Tape Gray in my collection, but I wanted to just do this little pseudo comparison so you can see these are also not dupes. Next for Ivory Tower, I wanted to show it next to ILNP's Canvas, which is a pure white, so you can see that Ivory Tower is in fact an off-white because it definitely is very light and bright. I feel like you can tell that it does have that little bit of warmth to it. So I did also want to quickly show this next to Holo Taco's Butter Me Up from their Cookies and Cremes bundle earlier this year. That one is like a true pastel buttercream yellow, so it's even more saturated than Ivory Tower, so definitely not a dupe. dupe. For closer color comparisons, I immediately thought of Cracked Polish's Lion's Tooth from their spring collection earlier this year. This one has a very similar off-white tinge, but it's a little bit more yellowy. For something a little bit more neutral, I thought of OPI's My Vampire is Buff, which is definitely one of the oldest polishes in my collection, and I could have sworn these were going to be dupes just by seeing them in the bottle, but seeing them side by side on the nail, you can see that they are not dupes. I do love all three shades though. I'm just a sucker for off-white shades like this, and out of the three, I would say that Ivory Tower definitely had the best formula. Then for Devil's Advocate, I wanted to quickly show this next to Orbite Me because it's the only other super dark vampy red that I have from Holo Taco, but obviously it's a totally different formula. For closer comparisons, I immediately thought of Cirque's Empire State of Mind, which is a very dark oxblood red kind of color, but it's a little bit lighter or brighter maybe. So for something even darker, I thought the closer color would be Essie's Wicked, which is just one of their iconic shades. And I would say these also looked incredibly similar in the bottle. I decided to best show the color differences. I can show one coat of each first, and you can see Devil's Advocate leans a little bit closer to Cirque's Empire State of Mind, but then once you do that second coat, it deepens up so much that it looks more similar to Essie's Wicked, which again is just a solid cream, and it's so dark that it basically looks black in most lighting, while Cirque's Empire State of Mind is really dark, but I feel like you can still tell that it's red. Then for Inkwell, I wanted to show this next to Mooncat's Dark Horse because it's the only other super dark, shimmery kind of brown shade that I have, but as you can see, these are definitely not dupes. Mooncat's is a little bit lighter and warmer, almost like a mahogany kind of color, and the shimmer definitely stands out in that one a lot more, so you can see just how Inkwell looks a lot deeper on the nail, almost like a black shade highlighted by that bronze shimmer. Then for Ivy League, I of course had to show this next to Mooncat's Access Denied because I immediately thought of that shade when I saw Ivy League, and they're definitely very similar, but I wouldn't call them dupes either. And I did also want to show this next to China Glaze's Hex Boyfriend, which is an oldie in my collection, but I just again was immediately reminded of it because it's another super dark, shimmery kind of green. It does have a similar blackened green base like Ivy League does, but the shimmer is a lot finer and more dense, so it almost comes across as a sheen. I would say that the shimmer in Access Denied is a little bit more similar to Ivy League, but Access Denied actually has a black base as opposed to a green base. So I'd actually say that Access Denied has a more similar formula to Inkwell, where the shimmer kind of gets swallowed. Then for Silent Library, I was immediately reminded of Overshadowed, which was from the Declassified collection last winter. It's another steely blue kind of shade, but obviously a very different finish and a little bit lighter too. I thought that maybe Midnight Owl would be a little bit more similar since it's deeper, but as you can see, that one's more of an indigo shade. It's not a true steel navy kind of color. Not to mention Midnight Owl is more of a jelly glitter bomb. So yeah, on the nail, you can definitely tell that it leans a little bit more purple compared to the other two shades, which I think complement each other nicely. I thought I had some closer ILNP colors. The first one that I pulled out was Bulletproof Symphony, which is one of their ultra metallics, which has a very similar foily metallic finish, but as you can see color-wise, this one is way off. So I thought a closer color was ILNP's by Nightfall, which doesn't have that same foily metallic kind of finish. It's more of a crully with a shimmer and a holographic particle, so a kind of a different look, but I feel like color-wise, these are pretty similar. Not exact dupes though. I think I would say By Nightfall has a little bit more of a teal kind of color maybe. It's just not as steely navy blue as Silent Library is. And lastly, for Secret Society, I wanted to quickly show some bottle comparisons next to Alien Infatuation and Spirit Fingers because they both are gray, crully polishes with a shimmer and dainty hollow sparkle, but as you can see, they are totally different. Secret Society is a lot darker and warmer in its base color and obviously has more of this antique gold shimmer. So while I knew it wasn't going to be an exact dupe, I was immediately reminded of Mooncat's Firewall, which has a very similar antique gold shimmer. It is a little bit lighter or maybe paler, and I think generally I would say that Mooncat's has more of this almost liquid metallic kind of finish as opposed to this shimmery crelly. There's also no holo in Firewall, but they're still kind of similar. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Holo Taco's new Dark Academia collection. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release because I am really liking these. I feel like the theme, the color palette is just so on point. Even though some of the colors do feel a little samey, I feel like there's still just this beautiful cohesiveness to it. Obviously, it's very fitting for this time of year, totally getting me more into those fall feels. I thought the formulas were fantastic. The range of colors and finishes were great. And as far as the specific bundles go, with the Grad School Bundle, I really love that that just had a mix of different kind of shimmers and sparkly shades. I was really surprised to see them do another frosted metal because if you don't know, that finish unfortunately has a bad reputation for tarnishing over the years. So hopefully, since this one is so dark, it'll be less apparent when it does tarnish, but I love the color for what it is. To me, this is like a navy blue I would love more in the winter than in the fall, but I'm still very excited to see it here. The other three shimmers in that bundle are really great, but I still feel a little conflicted about Inkwell, where I want to love it, but I just don't because I feel like the shimmer in that one just gets swallowed up by the base. And I feel like it's such a shame because when I think of Dark Academia, yes, I do generally think of these darker colors, especially like the greens, but it's also very much like dark brown. And we only really got one in this collection, but I feel like it's just so dark that it basically looks black. Obviously, if you're more into a very subtle shimmer that's like barely there, it kind of hides on your nail, it's a great polish for that, but I just wish the shimmer was a little bit more turned up so it would at least match the shimmer intensity like the other shades in the bundle. And then for the Undergrad Bundle, I think it's absolutely solid. Such a great 4-piece collection. Again, the formulas are incredible where you can just easily wear them on their own, but I think they're just gonna be so fantastic for nail art, which I really love doing, even though I guess it's been a while since I've done it. Just coming across creams that have fantastic formulas is just so satisfying, and it's really like the level of quality I expect from Holo Taco, but I haven't always gotten with their creams before. So I was very pleased with these, especially with the off-white shade, because I know generally white shades are like trickier to formulate. They're always going to be a little bit streaky, and I think the color is just so flattering too. Like, I love a nice ivory off-white kind of shade in the fall because to me it's the equivalent of wearing like a classic white mani in the summer. So I really love that shade. I think it's just so gorgeous. The only gripe that I have with that bundle is with Devil's Advocate, where I just wish it was a little bit more of like a true jelly finish as opposed to a crelly. I really would have loved to see more of that like stained glass effect where it's just very translucent and you see that rich color but still that juicy finish. I think because they made this one a crelly, it's just more pigmented than traditional jelly polishes, but it ends up building to full opacity on 2 coats and it just ends up looking not much different than a solid dark red cream polish, as you saw in my comparisons. And as you know, I'm a big jelly lover, so I would have loved to see that one lean more on the jelly side just to offer a little bit more versatility where you could wear it on 1 or 2 coats for that juicy translucent jelly look, or you could do a 3rd coat to make it like more opaque. Either way though, the color is absolutely gorgeous and I'm just happy to see it in Holo Taco's lineup because I feel like they were just missing really dark vampy reds. The only other one we got this year was Orbite Me back in the I Need Space collection earlier in the year, so I feel like this is a perfect shade to complement that one. But yeah, all that being said, I generally am a big fan of this release and I'm just so excited for it because I feel like I've really been loving Holo Taco's previous fall collections and this one is another banger. So you'll have to let me know what you think of this collection, if you're going to be picking them up or if you already did. Let me know if you're loving one of the bundles more than the other, or just let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!